Okay, it will talk about what? It will talk about, can't you see my screen?
The evolution of populations.
Okay, very good. So yeah, so we are going to talk about evolution of population. So in a previous chapter, we've talked about Darwin. Okay, we have talked about natural selection. Okay, so how evident are the changes in a population. Okay, so we've talked about some sort of cladogram. Okay, so how one species is closely related to another species living in a probably different or the same area. So by this time, our focus of discussion is about evolution. Okay, evolution of populations. So ang focus nito, it's not for species level but on population level. Okay. Anyway, as I said, we will not be able to cover all the necessary information about this particular chapter. However, as I said, I'm going to give you other learning materials, okay, in Schoology, including videos, including activities for us to cope with the necessary information that we need in this chapter. Okay po? So, for now, so we'll just focus on this presentation. Okay po? I hope you are getting what I mean with my instruction. That we focus on the presentation today. Now, later on, you will have some exercises, okay, in your Schoology accounts as your asynchronous task. Probably you can do that later, or you can do that tomorrow, for your Saturday class. Okay, so let's proceed with what is the content of this chapter. Okay po, so evolution of population. Before we continue with this one, so let's try to figure out first what population is. Can anyone guess what population is? You can either chat or turn on your mic. Population. Can anyone define what population is? It's been discussed in science subjects in your grade 7. Okay, so according to Ione, so number of people in a given area. So does that pertain only to people? So anyway, that's correct. However, when we speak of population, can anyone have another answer? What is that? Carl.
Population is the group of individuals that have the same that is same species living in a given area.
Okay, very good. So, yan, very good. You just conceptualize what Ione and Chelsea have said, that when we speak of population, it's a group of individuals under the same species. Okay, under the same species in a given area. Okay, given area or habitat. Okay po. So, yan. So, we must know first what the definition of population is and species. Okay? Yan. So, let's continue. Okay, so here, okay, so let's come up with the overview. Okay, so we've talked already about natural selection. Natural selection does not affect only individual, okay, individual species. However, it also affects population at population level. Okay, it intervenes at the population level of a particular species. Okay, when we speak of genetic variation is the changes of the content of gene in a given population. Okay, and this contributes to evolution. Okay, so evolution can be classified into two. We have microevolution and macroevolution. Okay, let's focus first on microevolution. When we speak of microevolution, it's the change in allele frequencies in a population over generation. So this might sound confusing, okay, because we are encountering terms like allele and frequencies. When we speak of frequencies, that pertains to the number or how greater or how gaano ba kadami yung particular allele. Okay, when we speak of allele class, we've talked already that in our previous discussions. Allele means a different forms of gene. Okay, for example, we are looking at hair color. So allele can be black or red hair color. Okay, so So in a population, for example, in a population of people, how many are black, for example, merong black hair. Okay, ilan naman yung merong red hair, merong brown hair, for example. So that's what we mean by allele frequencies in a population because for us, okay, we are one population. So when we speak of change, nagbabago siya. Okay, there will come a time na dadami yung red hair. There will come a time na kukonti yung black hair. So just for a hypothetical perspective lang naman. Okay? Change. There is a change in allele frequencies over generation. When we speak of generation, that does not only pertain to 1 day, years. So it can be longer, like decades, like centuries then. Okay po? So, what affects microevolution in a population? Okay, so number one, okay, we have mutation. Okay, mutation is one factor or main factor that we have change in allele frequency or the microevolution. Okay, also we have sexual reproduction because we know that in meiosis, sexual reproduction. Sorry, nabubulol ako. Sexual reproduction. Nakikita niyo yung presentation ko, class?
Opo.
Apo.
Oh, nag-message kasi si...
Sir, hindi po.
Oh.
Sir, nasa first page lang yan.
Okay, so wait lang. I have to restart first. Okay, so as I said, two processes that affect microevolution or that triggers microevolutions are mutation and sexual reproduction. Mutation typically is a change in the DNA content or change in a DNA level. Okay, sexual reproduction also is part of microevolution because it leads to the genetic variation. Okay, it leads to the genetic variation. When we have genetic variation, we have phenotypic variation, and that differs from the appearance of one organism to the other organisms in gene pools that contributes to the differences among individuals. Okay po? So yan. Let's continue. Okay, so look at this one. So this one is an evidence of genetic variation. Okay po? So, yan. Okay, so let's continue. So for people who are studying this kind of field, so they are called as population geneticists. Okay, they measure polymorphisms in a population by determining the amount of heterozygosity at the gene and molecular levels. Remember class, pag heterozygote, they contain different kind of allele or different form of allele. Okay po? So remember, homozygotes, recessive, heterozygotes. Okay po? So yan. Okay, so they determine the amount of heterozygosity, okay, or the heterozygotes individual in a particular population. Okay? So, average heterozygosity measures the average percent of loci. This one is a particular location of allele that are heterozygous in a population. Okay? So, average heterozygosity. Okay po? Most species exhibit geographic variation. Kasi, di ba, nagkakaiba. Merong upland, merong lowland, okay, merong terrestrial, merong marine, okay, so meron tayong geographic variation. And this also contributes to the variation of species, okay? Okay, so this geographic variation also contain differences or variation in the gene pools of separate population or population subgroups. So some examples of geographic variations occur as accline, which is graded change in a trait along geographic axis. Okay po? So cline. Okay, graded change in a trait along a geographic axis. Okay? Merong gradual change, or you can observe gradual change nga, okay, or little change along with the geographic axis. Okay, for example, okay, let's consider geographic axis as height, for example, in a mountain. Okay, those species that can be found at the base of the mountain slightly differs from as we go up with the mountain. Okay po? Yan, there is a gradual change. Okay, so look at this line graph. Okay, you will see that what do you call this? You will see that the main geographic axis presented here is based on latitude level. Okay, so remember that in a latitude, it differs in climatic condition. At the near the equator, it's more hotter, or it's more warmer than the lower or higher latitude levels, okay, towards the pole. Okay, so and on the y-axis, so we have allele frequency. Okay, so this is the LDHB allele frequency. Okay, so you will see that at warm areas, tingnan nyo, so yan, so that's the allele frequency of LDHB. Okay, so that's the allele frequency. Meaning, in warmer areas, hindi siya masyadong konti yung allele frequency nitong allele na to. Same thing also with cold. Okay, so at around 6 degrees Celsius, konti din. Okay, but in the middle, between warm and cold, we cannot say that's lukewarm. Okay, so but in the middle of that, okay, so there are allele frequencies. Okay, many allele frequency. Okay po, so makikita nyo naman dito. Okay po, so yan, so that's around 0.2 to 0.4 allele frequency. Okay po, so that geographical variation, anong tawag doon? Geographic variation contributes to the variation of individual species. Okay? So, yan. So, let's talk about mutation. So, when we speak of mutation, these are changes in nucleotide sequence of DNA, di ba? Instead of adenine, it becomes cytosine. Instead of guanine, it becomes, for example, adenine. Okay? So, there is a change. And that change is not normal. However, nagiging normal siya kasi normal naman talaga yung mutation kasi we are always subject to mutation din. Okay po? So, mutation causes new genes and alleles to arise. Okay? So, wala naman yung gene na to, but after mutation, it appears. Okay? Also with the alleles. Kasi alleles is a form of genes. Okay? So, only mutations in cell that produce gametes can be passed on to offspring. Kasi di ba, in meiosis, halimbawa, yung mutation mo nasa nasa somatic cell. Okay, yung mutation. that means you cannot pass on to your offspring. But if the mutation is if the mutation happened during the production of gametes, this can be passed. Okay, this can be passed to your offspring. Kasi siya na yung offspring will come from a combination of egg and sperm. Okay po? So, we have different forms or types of mutation. The very harmless compared to other types of mutation is the point mutation because it just changes, ito na yung sabi ko, one base in a DNA. For example, if guanine was changed to adenine and cytosine was changed to guanine, so that's what you called as point mutation. Okay pa? So, yan. Harmless siya. Anyway, hindi din siya harmless, pero harmless siya as compared to other forms of mutation. Okay? So, the effects of point mutations can vary. Mutation in non-coding regions of DNA are often harmless. Okay? When we speak of non-coding regions, ito yung hindi naman siya kinocode for a particular protein, okay, a particular trait. Harmless siya kasi non-coding nga siya. Pero, kapag coding siya, okay, so that might affect the structural component of a protein. Okay po? So, mutation in a gene might not affect protein production because of redundancy in the genetic code. Okay? Okay, so it might not affect protein production. Kasi, when we speak of redundancy, meron tayong genetic code, di ba? Okay, yung genetic code, it does not only code for one protein only. Okay po? So, mutations that result in a change in protein production are often harmful. Ito na yung sinasabi ko. Na when it changes the structural component of a protein, so that becomes harmful kasi that's not normal anymore. Okay? Mutations that result in a change in protein production can sometimes increase the fitness of an organism in an environment. So, ito naman pala. So, may goodness out of badness. Okay? So, because it can increase the fitness. Okay? So, for adaptation, the end result of that mutation is for adaptation then. Okay? So, that's good. Okay? For an individual. Okay? So, ito yung malala. Okay, yung kanina point mutation, ito naman, chromosomal mutation. Chromosomal mutations that delete, pag sinabing delete, tinatanggal, disrupt, or rearrange many loci are typically harmful. Kasi a particular section not point. Kumbaga, in a school was supposed to create a protein. Pero sa point mutation, meron lang for example, tinanggal na isang estudyante. So hindi yun masyadong mahahalata. Pero kapag yung isang section tinanggal mo, in the case of chromosomal mutation, that's gonna be harmful. That might affect the school as well. Okay po? So isang section, kung sa point mutation isang estudyante, sa chromosomal mutation naman, isang section. Okay? So yung tinanggal. So, mutation rates are low in animals and plants. So, ito naman, very low siya sa animals and plants and even lower siya sa prokaryotes. However, higher siya sa viruses. Okay po? Kaya, hindi pa nga 1 year yung COVID-19 nagkaroon na ng new variant. Kasi it's viruses highly mutate. Okay po? Are you following?
Opo.
Okay, very good. So, yan. So, they are low in animals and plants, even lower with prokaryotes, but higher in viruses like COVID-19. Okay po? So, for sexual reproduction, kanina, pinag-aralan natin yung mutations. Pag-aralan nyo yung different types of mutation. Under chromosomal mutations, meron tayong different types. So, we have this frame shift mutation which deletes these are harmful, which duplicates, okay, We have also translocation, deletion, duplication, translocation. Okay, so these are forms of chromosomal mutations then. Okay? So, same thing with point mutation. Okay, for sexual reproduction, pag-aralan nyo na lang yung mutation. Okay, so anyway, I'll be giving videos for that. For sexual reproduction, can shuffle existing alleles into new combination. In organisms that reproduce sexually, recombination of alleles is more important than mutation in producing genetic differences. Kasi yan talaga, yung genetic differences talaga, nangyayari talaga yan during sexual recombination. If you still remember the process of meiosis, that there is a presence under prophase 1 ng crossing over. Crossing over is the swapping of portion of the chromosome from non-sister chromatids to the other non-sister chromatids. Okay po? So, yan. So, that contributes to the genetic variation. Aside from crossing over, meron pa tayong independent assortment. And in that way that during the metaphase of meiosis, metaphase 1 of meiosis, okay, so it assorts independently. Okay, so pwedeng baliktaran, pwedeng kabilaan. So yan. So that contributes to the genetic differences then. Okay? And it's more common. Okay? Common. Okay? Siya yung talagang nagko-contribute sa differences ng gene ng isang population. Okay po? So, okay, these genetic differences make adaptation possible. Okay po, so we will come now to understand HardyWeinberg Equation. Okay, so it's a very interesting topic. So, HardyWeinberg Equation tests whether a sexually reproducing population is evolving. Kung nag-i-evolve ba yung population. So, now we look at population level, ha? We look at population level. So, a population, ito, dinefine nyo na kanina. Okay, so it's a localized group of individuals or species, okay, capable of interbreeding. Kasi pag sinabi natin species, capable of interbreeding for sexually reproducing individuals. And offspring are fertile, okay, or fertile. So it should be fertile. For example, in the case of horse and donkey, it produces a non-fertile mule, and that's different. Okay, magkaiba naman yung species kasi ng horse and ng donkey. Okay, but for people, if one girl mate with another boy and they produced a fertile offspring. Okay, so we are under the same species. Okay pa? So that's population, and that's what species mean. Okay, so a gene pool consists of all the alleles for all loci in population. Kaya nga siya gene pool. Pool means totality. Okay, kalahatan. Okay, all the alleles. Tandaan niyo yung alleles, kasama na dyan yung black hair, red hair, white skin, black skin, etc. Basta madami yan. Okay, for all loci in a population. So a locus is fixed if the individuals in the populations are homozygous for the same allele. For example, in this kind of population, lahat lang siya black hair. In this kind of population, lahat lang siya red hair. So, locus is fixed. However, kapag nasamahan na siya ng red and black hair, magkasama na siya in a single population, yon, hindi na nagiging fixed yung locus kasi there can be a change. If black hair is gonna go up in the number, or red hair allele is gonna go down in number. Okay pa? So, yan, gene pool. Okay, so HardyWeinberg Equation looks for the frequency of allele in a given population. Halimbawa, it's gonna look for red hair. How much or how many is the number of allele in a given population? Kung mas madami ba talaga yung red hair or mas madami ba talaga yung black hair. So, ginagamit ko lang class yung red and black hair kasi to make it simplify, okay? To make it simplified for you. Okay po? So, kaya yun yung ginagamit kong example. Okay? So, the frequency of an allele can be calculated in a population. So, if there are two alleles at the locus, okay, so let's use P and Q, are used to represent their frequencies. Okay? Two alleles at a locus. Okay? Halimbawa, etong P, black, and Q, or red. These are used to represent their frequencies. Diba? Halimbawa, wala nang ibang alleles. Dalawa lang yung alleles in a given population. Kasi, ang Hardy-Weinberg equation kasi, para lang siya sa dalawang allele. Okay pa? So, meron lang tayong, in a given population, meron lang tayong black and red. Okay? So, the frequency of all alleles in a population will add up to 1. Kasi, halimbawa, we have 25% are red hair and the other 75% is black hair. Okay? So, that adds up to 1 or 100% of the population. So, P plus Q is 1 or percentage. If you're going to convert this in a percentage, so 25% plus 75% is equal to 100%. But we use decimals here. So P plus Q is equals to 1. For example, 0.25, 0.75, so that's gonna be 1. Okay po? I hope you're getting what I mean with this one. Okay po? So that's the basic equation of Hardy-Weinberg. Okay? But Hardy-Weinberg Principle describes an ideal population that is not evolving. Okay, so yun yung yun yung equation na very ideal, na it is assumed that population is not evolving. Okay po? So the closer a population is to the criteria of Hardy-Weinberg Principle, the more stable the population is likely to be. Okay? So, we calculate genotype frequencies using this formula. So, P2, tandaan nyo yung P, it's a form of allele 1, Q is allele 2. But this one is for genotypic frequencies. So, P raised to 2 plus 2PQ plus Q squared is equal to 1. So, remember the equation. Are you familiar with the equation? Are you familiar with the equation sa algebra? P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared. Hindi kayo familiar? Okay, so yan. Hindi. Okay, so basta yan. Okay, so where P squared and Q squared represent the frequencies of the homozygous genotypes. Homozygous kasi halimbawa itong P squared, lahat sila red and red. Ito naman na Q squared, lahat sila black and black. Okay? So this represents homozygous individuals. Number of homozygous individuals. However, sa 2PQ, it represents the frequency of heterozygous individuals. Okay? 2PQ. Meaning, some are having red allele, some are having black allele. Okay po? So, yan. So, let's continue. Okay, so Hardy-Weinberg ideal conditions are followed. Okay, so ano yung mga conditions? Okay, so it is assumed that there is no mutation within the population. Okay, so random mating are present or is present. No natural mute selection. Okay, so very ideal talaga to. Extremely large population and no gene flow. Ito yung mga conditions na hindi naman talaga siya nami-meet naturally. Kasi hindi mo naman masasabing in nature or in a normal condition walang mutation. Hindi mo naman masasabing random mating kasi meron nga tayong selection. Okay? Minimate nung halimbawa yung peacock yung magandang magandang tail, for example. Okay? So, hindi talaga siya nangyayari in a natural setting. No natural selection. Hindi naman talaga siya nangyayari kasi in a dark environment, the white ones will be more captured by the predators than the black ones because of camouflage. Okay? So, hindi naman talaga na siya nangyayari. Extremely large population, there are mababa yung population. No gene flow then. Kasi when you speak of no gene flow, walang immigration, emigration. So, yan. Okay, so let's apply the HardyWeinberg Principle. Okay, kasi it's still useful in ecology works. So, we can assume the locus that causes phenylketonuria. Okay, so phenylketonuria, it's a disease. Okay pa? So, is in HardyWeinberg equilibrium. Given that PKU gene mutation rate is low, okay? Kaya natin siya ginamit. Mate selection is random with respect to whether or not an individual is a carrier of a PKU allele. Kung carrier ka, kung heterozygous ka ba sa PKU allele. No natural selection can only act or rare homozygous individuals who do not follow dietary restriction. Okay, so walang natural selection, walang mate selection kasi hindi mo naman alam kung carrier ba. Okay, mataas yung population, yung tao. We are now more than 7 billion. So, migration has no effect as many other populations have similar allele frequencies. Okay po? So that's why PKU is very near to HardyWeinberg Principle. Okay, so here, the occurrence of PKU, remember class PKU is homozygous recessive. Okay? So the occurrence of PKU is 1 per 10,000 births. Okay? 1 per 10,000 births. So remember class that Q2 is the number of individuals, homozygous individuals. For example, Q2 is homozygous recessive and P is the homozygous dominant. So let's say this one is recessive and that's the PKU. Q2 is 1 over 10,000, that's gonna be 0.0001. Okay po? So, you find the square root of that, then you have Q as 0.01. Okay, so you do some simple calculations. Okay po? So, the frequency of normal alleles is, syempre, nahanap mo na yung Q, you can now find from the equation P plus Q is equal to 1 by transposing Q from here to the other side of the equation, magiging P is equal to 1 minus Q. Okay? Substituting from the given formula, it's equal to 1 minus 0.01 is equal to 0.99. So the P is 0.99 or 99%, okay, plus 1%. So that's gonna be 100% or 1. So out of, in a given population, you can find the number of homozygous and heterozygous individuals. Nagets niyo yung equation, class? Nagets niyo? Nagets po? Kung hindi, magsabi na. Mahen, nagets?
Opo, sir.
Okay, very good. Okay, so yan. You just work with the equation. Okay, if you know how to manipulate formulas, you manipulate equations, you will arrive with this one. Okay po? So remember the general formula, P plus Q is equal to 1. So given the Q, you can find the P. Okay? So by 1 minus Q, that's gonna be 0.99. Okay po? So the frequency of heterozygotes or the carriers of PKU allele is 2PQ. Kasi 'di ba the 2PQ represents the frequency of heterozygotes. Okay, so we are now determining the number of dominant we are now determining the normal, meaning wala siyang PKU allele. We are now determining the number of heterozygotes, meaning carrier siya ng PKU allele. And we are now determining the number of Q. And that is the people you have PKU. Okay? Phenylketonuria. Okay? So, yan. 2PQ, so applying from the formula, 2 times P, which is 0.99, times Q, which is 0.01. So the frequency of that is 0.0198, or approximately 2% of the population of US. 2% of the US population. Okay, nagets niyo po? So given the fact that ito lang yung given niya, okay? 1 per 10,000 births. And you can now identify kung ilan ba sa population ang walang PKU or kung ilan yung carrier ng PKU allele. Okay po? Gets po? Yung Hardy-Weinberg Principle? Nagets naman po? Okay, so anyway, you can review this anytime kasi I'll be posting this sa Schoology niyo. Okay, so natural selection, genetic drift, and gene flow can alter allele frequencies in a population. There are 3 major factors that alter allele frequencies and bring about most evolutionary change. We have natural selection, which is non-random, meaning wala siyang pinipili. Okay? Non-random. Okay? It selects, kaya nga siya non-random. But the genetic drift is random and the gene flow is also random. Okay? So these are 3 major factors that change allele frequencies in a given population. Okay? So let's talk about this. So natural selection, differential success in reproduction results in certain alleles being passed to the next generation in greater proportions by more fit individuals. Okay, so more fit, more proportion in a population. Okay, so tinatawag to class na differential success in reproduction. Kaya nga sinasabing kung sino yung fittest, siya yung mas madami. Siya yung more likely to reproduce. Okay? So next, genetic drift describes how allele frequencies fluctuate randomly from one generation to the next. Paano ba siya nagfa-fluctuate? Paano ba siya nag-change, nagtataas, baba, taas, baba? Okay? The smaller a sample, okay, for example, the smaller a sample or smaller a population is, the greater the chance of deviation from the predicted result. Kasi it's affected. Okay? Kung sino yung mas maliit na population, siya yung mas apektado ng genetic drift. Okay, so genetic drift tends to reduce genetic variation through losses of alleles. Okay, so yan, kapag nag-lose tayo ng alleles, so genetic drift tends to reduce. Okay, so here is an example of genetic drift. Remember that the alleles can be in flower can be red, can be white, can be heterozygotes. Yung white supposed to be ito kasi itong example na to, it's an example of what? Complete dominance, incomplete dominance, or codominance. Can you identify? Just look at the alleles of the flower. Ano yung form of dominance na meron dito sa flower na to? Is it complete dominance, incomplete dominance, or codominance? Can you identify? Can you identify, class? Oh, nakalimutan na. Binigay ko to sa question. Sa exam. Oh.
Sa generation 3 po, complete domination.
Ano po? Ano yun, Ione?
Generation 3 po, Generation 3 po, complete dominance po.
Complete dominance. So, I just want to remind you, class, na pag sinabi natin complete dominance, merong dominant, tsaka merong recessive, di ba? So, pag pinaghalo mo yung dominant tsaka yung recessive, for example here, red and white, pag pinaghalo mo yung red tsaka white, halimbawa yung heterozygotes nila, if the dominant is red, yung magiging phenotype ng heterozygote is red. Okay? So, tingnan nyo. This does not, ito, hindi to complete dominance. Okay? In this population. Okay? So, pag incomplete dominance, pag pinaghalo mo yung dalawang alleles supposed to be red and white, that's the blending. Okay? So, blending hypothesis. Blending hypothesis means, it's the trait in between. Ano yung in between ng red and white? That's gonna be pink. So, in this case, this flower is incomplete dominance. Okay, pag sinabi naman natin class na codominance, both alleles are appearing in the structure of the flower. Okay, if there is heterozygotes of red and white, so you can see from the heterozygotes that there are portions of the flower that are red, there are portions that are white. Okay po, so that's what we mean by codominance. So, I hope you're getting this one. Okay? So, in this case, this one is a incomplete dominance, meaning the heterozygotes are pink. Okay? So, look at the frequency. Okay? So, frequency of P is 0.7, frequency of Q is 3. Okay? P is the red, Q is the white. Okay po? So, for generation 2, P is 0.5. Okay? So, 0.7 plus 0.3, that's gonna be 1. P is 0.5 and IQ is 0.5. Okay? So, bilangin natin nga. So, let's try to count if the illustration connects with the given information. So, we have red. Okay, we have red here. So, we count red. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Bilangin na muna natin yung lahat ng red na flower. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 times 2, we have 10. So, yung pink, bilangin natin. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, 10 plus 4, kasi kalahati lang naman yung pink ang meron sa red. 14. So, we have 14. 14. So, what about white? So, we have 1 and 2. Okay. Plus 4. We have 6. 14 out of 6. Parehas ba siya dun sa sa ratio? Parehas ba? 0.7 and 0.3? Oh, yung mga mathematicians dyan. Oh, parehas ba yung ratio? Yung 14 out of 6. Is that the same ratio as 7:3? 14:6, 7:3. Okay, opo. Okay, very good, very good, Ayoni. Okay? So next, for generation 2, for example, after some time, nag-produce na siya ng another generation. Okay? So, ito na yung magiging allele frequency niya. Yung P is 0.5, Q is 0.5. So, let's count. So, how many reds are there? 1, 2, 3. Times 2, we have 6. How many pinks? 1, 2, 3, 4. So, 6 plus 4, we have 10. Okay? So, let's count for the white. 1, 2, 3. So, 3 times 2, we have 6. Tapos, let's count pink. 4. 6 plus 4, 10. Kaya siya, 10:10 or 0.5 is to 0.5. Nagets niyo po, class?
Opo.
Okay, very good. So, yan. So, nagkaroon ng allele frequency variation. So, ano yung tumaas? Ang tumaas is the Q. Bumaba is the P. Nagets niyo po? From generation 1 to generation 2. Nagagets po? Bumaba ang allele frequency ng P, tumaas ang allele frequency ng Q. Okay? So, for the third generation, lahat na lang red. Okay? So, since They are all red. They are 100% P and 0% Q. Okay, so nagkaroon tayo ng genetic drift under this scenario. Nagets po? Nagets? Okay, very good. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so we have this term founder effect. Founder effect occurs when a few individuals become isolated from a larger population. Okay, nahihiwalay sila sa larger population. For example, hypothetically, yung isang grupo ng tao napunta sa isla and wala na silang connection sa outside world. Okay? So, that's what we mean by isolation. Okay? Mamaya, malalaman natin kung ano yung kinds ng isolation kasi there are different kinds of isolation. We have sympatric, we have allopatric, geographical isolation. Okay? So, allele frequencies in a small founder populations can be different from those in the larger parent population. Halimbawa, sa mainland ng Karamuan, for example, yun talaga yung larger populations dun sa mainland kasi aside from malaki yung place, dun talaga sila nanggaling. Then isolate to for example an island in Karamuan, na isolate yung small number of population throughout the time, there will come what do you call this? A difference. Okay? Difference in allele, difference in physical appearance din. Okay? Magkakaroon ng mutation, magkakaroon ng adaptation because na-isolate na sila. Kumbaga, they are now classified as the outside population. Okay? So that's founder effect. When individuals become isolated. Some individuals. Okay? So bottleneck effect is the sudden reduction in population size due to a change in environment such as, for example, nagkaroon ng extreme typhoon, super typhoon or sobrang lakas na bagyo, nagkaroon ng volcanic eruption, nagkaroon ng ano ba yung mga natural disaster, meteorite impact, or nagkaroon ng anong tawag doon? Yun, pagbagsak ng mga earthquake. So very good. Basta yun yung mga environmental disaster. Okay po? Very good. And they are natural. Okay, so kapag merong nagkaroon ng great sudden reduction in the population size, you call that class as bottleneck effect. Okay po? So the resulting gene pool may no longer be reflected of the original population's gene pool. So, if the population remains small, it may be further affected by genetic drift. Kasi baga, yung genetic drift, very prone siya sa mga small population. Okay? So, that's the bottleneck effect. So, yan yung example. Okay? Original population, ganyan. So, meron tayong allele na white, allele na blue, allele na yellow. So, after event, disastrous event, ito na lang yung natira, yung survival population. Nawala na yung yellow. We have more blue than white then. Okay po? So, if this surviving population remains the same in number throughout the time, so it's always be subjected to a genetic drift. Okay? And this surviving population does not represent now the original population. Okay? Kasi nagkaroon na siya ng number reduction. Okay po? Nag-guess niyo po? And that's gonna be the end of this chapter. Okay? Ay, meron pa. Sorry, akala ko ano. So, so effects of genetic drifts, this is the summary. So number 1, genetic drift is significant in small population. Very significant. Genetic drift causes allele frequencies to change at random. Genetic drift can lead to a loss of genetic variation within a population. Genetic drift can cause harmful alleles to become fixed. Okay po? So, so let's talk about gene flow. Kanina, mention about immigration and emigration. Pag sinabi natin class na immigration, going into a particular population. Pag emigration, going out of a particular population. That's gene flow. It consists of the movement of alleles among population. Are you aware of any species that are capable of migrating? For example, migratory bird, migratory something, ng mga butterflies. Di ba meron yan? So, yan. So, they also affect allele frequency. Okay? Because of the gene flow. So, alleles can be transferred through the movement of fertile individuals' organisms. For example, pollen. So, gene flow tends to reduce differences between populations over time. Diba? Halimbawa, nagkaroon na tayo ng founder effect. Na-isolate na yung one population to the other population. Okay? In order for that to have variation, in order for that to have variation class, dapat ma-isolate sila. Wala silang communication among one population to the other. Between one population with another. Okay? And when this happens over a long period of time, magkakaroon sila ng individual variation. One population will have different variation depending on the environment. The other population will have another variation as well depending on their environment. Okay? Pero, kapag merong gene flow, meaning there is a transfer of individual from one population to another population, meaning, okay, it will reduce the differences. Kasi nagkakaroon nga sila ng palitan, ng allele frequency. Nagagas niyo po yung ibig kong sabihin with this one. Okay? So, that's gene flow. It reduces the differences between populations over time. So, gene flow is more likely than mutations to alter allele frequencies directly. Okay? So, yan. So, that's gonna be gene flow. So, here is a cover magazine showing you, tingnan niyo yung caption. Okay? Basahin niyo. Take a good look at this woman. Okay? So, she was created by a computer from a mix of several races. What you see is a remarkable preview of the new face of America. Okay? Kasi baga sa Amerika, very common yung immigration and emigration. Yung mga Pilipino pumupunta sa Amerika kasi maganda, malamig. Same thing with the other Yung mga Americans pumupunta sa iba-ibang places for businesses and etc. And doon na nagsisettle somewhere else. Okay po? So, yan. It represents what? Gene flow. So, by this cover magazine, so yan, parang ini-explain niya yung gene flow. Okay? So, ano yung magiging output? Tignan mo naman yung mukha. Hindi mo siya ma-identify kung anong rasa siya kasi it's a combination, okay, of different races. Okay? Gets? Okay. Let's move forward. So, natural selection is the only mechanism that consistently causes adaptive evolution. Okay? Adaptation, natural selection, synonyms. Only natural selection consistently results in adaptive evolution. So, natural selection brings about adaptive evolution by acting on an organism's phenotype. For example, camouflage, behavioral like mimicking, and etc. Okay? So, natural selection, it's the relative fitness. The natural selection phrases struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. Okay, yun yung common know-how natin pagdating sa natural selection. Survival of the fittest, struggle of existence, but these are misleading as they imply direct competition among individuals. Okay, competition. So, pero in reality, hindi naman talaga lahat lang competition. So, it's more of reproductive success that is generally more subtle and depends on many factors. Hindi lang siya sa population level, okay, but also depends on the environmental approach. Okay po? So, relative fitness is the contribution of an individual that makes the gene pool of the next generation. Okay po? Relative to the contribution of other individuals. Okay? So, let's move. Okay, so there are 3 modes of natural selection and these are important. Number 1, directional selection favors individuals at one end of the phenotypic range. Okay, meaning if the environment is dark, okay, or polluted na siya, white individuals will tend to become dark. Okay po, that's directional individuals. When we speak of disruptive selection favors individuals at both extremes of the phenotypic range. Okay? It favors both extremes of the phenotypic range. Number 3, stabilizing selection favors intermediate. Okay, yung disruptive, for example, there are environments na, halimbawa, black, yung isa naman white, yung environment. Black environment, white environment. The gray environment, which is between the two, okay, will tend to separate into the extremes. Okay, maybe half will become white, maybe the other half will become black. So that's what we mean by disruptive selection. It separates the population into extremes. Stabilizing selection favors intermediate variants and acts against extreme phenotypes. Kabaliktaran naman to ng disruptive. Okay? Kung kanina, finifavor niya yung extreme ng disruptive, eto naman, finifavor niya yung intermediate. And against naman siya sa extreme. So, look at this graph. Ito yung original population. So, ito yung mga phenotypes niya. From brighter to darker, for color, for yung balahibo. Okay po? So, frequency of an individual. So, remember, meron kayong stat, it's a bell shape. Okay? Meaning that the population of these organisms are normally distributed. Okay? So, in directional selection, the tendency is that from the original selection with this one, it moves to the right, which means from brighter to darker. Okay, this one now are the evolved population. Meaning, nawala na yung white or brighter ones. Okay po? Gets? So, the other mode of natural selection is disruptive, meaning they favor extremes. Kaya nga siya nagkaroon ng dalawang bells dito sa graph. Okay? From the normal or original population, it favors the extremes. Okay po? So, yan. So, for stabilizing selection, it's against the disruptive selection. It favors the intermediate compared or against with the extremes. Okay po? Gets? So, yan. Kurtosis. Alam niyo yung kurtosis, normal distribution kapag bell shape. Okay? So, diniliskas yan sa stat kay Sir Paul nyo. Okay po? So, yan. Let's continue. Okay, so the key role of natural selection in adaptive evolution. So, natural selection increases the frequencies of alleles that enhance survival and reproduction. For example, the black ones are naturally selected in directional selection. So, yan. The darker will be more favorable in an environment. Meaning, sila yung mas dadami compared to the brighter ones. Okay, so adaptive evolution is equal to the match between an an organism and its environment. Kapag match ka sa environment, hindi lang sa kulay hindi lang sa kulay. Okay? Kapag nagmamatch ka sa environment, syempre, ikaw yung more likely to reproduce as compared dun sa hindi match. Kasi mag-i-struggle yung individuals na hindi match sa environment. Okay? Kaya it's very important to know first, halimbawa, yung pag-domesticate ng mga organisms, it's important to know their environment first before you domesticate. Halimbawa, mag-domesticate ka ng wild plant, okay? Kailangan mo munang alamin kung ano yung environment na meron dun sa wild plant na yun bago mo siya i-domesticate, okay? Kasi pag hindi niya nag-match yung environment mo sa bahay dun sa wild, hindi nag-match, so tendency is mamamatay yung plant na gusto mong i-domesticate. Okay po? It's important to understand first the environment, okay? Para mag-survive yung gusto mong i-domesticate na plant or na wild plant. Okay po? Do you agree?
Opo, sir.
Okay, very good. Okay, so this one is an example of naturally selected organism. Okay, letter A, it's a color changing ability of cuttlefish. Okay, color changing, meaning kung ano yung kulay ng environment, pag napunta siya sa dark, it will also blend with the dark environment. Kapag napunta siya dyan sa environment na yun, it will also blend. Camouflage. Okay, so letter B, movable jaw bones of snakes. Movable, in order for that to swallow food without grinding, without chewing. Okay po? Movable bones. Okay po? And that is hindi lang siya particular sa color, also with the anatomical structure of snake. Okay po? So because of environment's change, adaptive evolution is continuous process. Nagbabago yung environment natin. Even up to this time, nagbabago siya. And magbabago siya 10 years from now, centuries from now, magbabago siya talaga. So that's why evolution is a continuing process. Genetic drift and gene flow are random and so do not consistently lead to adaptive evolution. Random kasi sila. They are not naturally selected. As they increase and or decrease the match between an organism and its environment. So, meron tayo class dito sa sexual selection kasi we're talking about reproduction then. Sexual selection is natural selection for mating success because there are organisms that prefer this kind of behavior, this kind of organism with that particular appearance compared to the other ones. So, yun yung nangyayari, di ba? Yun yung nangyayari in a real world talaga. Okay? Siyempre, halimbawa, kung ikaw, halimbawa, ayoko naman sa pero ganun talaga. Let's apply that to humans, di ba? Kung ikaw, for example, you're going to choose your magiging husband or wife. Pipiliin mo yung pangit. Okay, pangit sa maganda. Siyempre, pipiliin mo yung maganda or gwapo over pangit. Nagigets niyo yung ibig ko sabihin? That's what we mean by sexual selection. Kung napili mo naman yung pangit, okay, kasi tumingin ka sa physical appearance. Kung napili mo naman yung pangit out of maganda or gwapo, meaning may nakita kang trait dun sa pangit na wala dun sa gwapo. For example, mabait yung pangit as compared dun sa gwapo or maganda. Nagigets niyo po? So, in reality, sexual selection is naturally selected based on the preference of an individual. Nagigets niyo po? So, it can result in sexual dimorphism. When we speak of sexual dimorphism, you can observe in a particular population kung ano talaga yung preference, ano yung mas nag-i-exist. It mark differences between sexes in secondary sexual characteristics. Secondary. Halimbawa, wala kasing picture dito. Eto. This one is an example of sexual dimorphism. It occurs in the populations of peacock wherein female naturally selects the one with maganda yung yung feather, okay, yung tail, something like that. Hindi ko kasi ma-explain. So, yan. So, sexual dimorphism. Halimbawa, there are also some examples of species where they prefer larger males. Okay? So, nagkakaroon sila ng differences. Okay? Larger males, kaya in a given population, mas malalaki talaga yung lalaki and compared sa babae. Okay? So, you call that as a sexual dimorphism. Okay? So, male showiness due to mate choice can increase a male's chances of attracting a female. Okay? In the case of birds, nagkakaroon pa sila ng mga rituals, nagkakaroon pa sila ng mga parang show off. Okay? Kumbaga sa tao, kailangan mo muna mag-pageant para piliin ka ng taong gusto mo. Okay po? So, while decreasing his chances of survival. Bakit? Siyempre, if you show yourself to the people, if you show yourself to others, okay, more likely you will be introduced to a predator. Okay, so that's why it decreases his chances of survival then. Okay, so it's a matter of survival by means of competition and survival by means of reproduction. Okay, so yan. So how do male preferences evolve? So the good genes hypothesis suggests that if a trait is related to male health, both the male trait and female preference for that trait should be selected for. Okay? So, yan. So kapag related siya sa male health and male trait, yun yung magiging preference na isi-select ng babae. Okay? So, preservation of genetic variation. Okay, so various mechanisms help to preserve genetic variation in a population. So we have this term diploidy, which maintains genetic variation in a form of hidden recessive alleles. Kasi diploid, when we speak of diploid, one that comes from mother offspring, mother parent, a mother, the other that comes from the father. And if this, kapag merong diploid, halimbawa, yung mother defective yung allele, nakukover yun ng father and vice versa. Okay po? So, it maintains genetic variation in the form of hidden recessive alleles. So, heterozygote advantage, of course, when heterozygotes have higher fitness than do both homozygotes. Halimbawa, mas maganda kapag heterozygotes, mas advantage ang heterozygotes. There are traits na advantage ang heterozygotes as compared to the homozygotes, recessive or dominant then. Okay? So, natural selection will tend to maintain 2 or more alleles at a locus. Yan, either homo or hetero. So, yan. Say for example, sickle cell allele causes mutation in hemoglobin but also confers malaria resistance. Okay, so yan. Kaya hindi siya nawawala, class, yung sickle cell disease natin, yung nagbe-burst yung hemoglobin, yung blood natin, nagiging moon shape siya instead of sun shape. Okay? So, kasi yung allele na sickle cell, meron siyang malaria resistance. Meaning, advantageous din siya. Okay? There is advantage, but advantageous siya pagdating sa malaria resistance. Okay po? So, here is an illustration showing you the distribution of malaria caused by, yung malaria class, it's caused by Plasmodium falciparum as a parasitic unicellular eukaryote. Plasmodium falciparum. Okay po? So, ito yung frequencies. Yung darker ones, greater than 12%, okay, of the sickle cell. Okay, so, yan. Yung nakikita nyo naman yung gradation sa graph. Hindi ko kasi alam kung saan tong part ng globe. Can you guess kung saan part siya? I think, hindi naman siya America siguro. So, basta yon. Okay, so, yan. So, it shows variation. So, in this part, mataas yung sickle cell frequencies. Okay? Maybe, very, very prone yung malaria disease. Okay po? So, yan. So, frequency-dependent selection. In frequency-dependent selection, the fitness of a phenotype declines if it becomes too common in a population. So, yan. So, pag talagang too common naman siya, nagdi-decline naman yung kanyang fitness. So, selection favors whichever phenotype is less common in a selection. You call that class as frequency-dependent. So, ito yung example ng frequency dependent. So, you can see here, right-mounted and left-mounted. Ano ba? Okay, so left-mounted. So, ganyan po. Tingnan nyo, sa left niya, mas malaki yung left-mounted. Sa right, right angle niya, mas maliit. Kaya siya tinawag na left-mounted. Nagigets nyo naman siguro. Right-mounted siya kasi right niya malaki, left niya maliit. Kaya siya right-mounted. Nagigets nyo po? So, if you look at this graph, comparing frequency of left-mounted individuals and the sample year from 1981 to 1990, you will see frequency dependent. Bakit siya naging frequency dependent? Okay, so kapag nasobran sa kulang, dumadami. Okay? Pag nakulangan naman, pag kulang, dumadami. Pag madami, kumukulang. Kaya siya, yung kanyang shape is zigzag. Tan. I guess niyo po? So, kaya itong example ng organism na to, it's frequency dependent. Pag kulang, kailangan nag-i-increase. Pag sobra, nagdi-decrease. Okay? Kaya siya frequency dependent. Okay, let's talk about neutral variation. Is genetic variation that appears to confer no selective advantage or disadvantage. Wala siyang selective advantage or disadvantage. For example, variation in non-coding region of DNA. Kasi hindi naman siya coding. Kaya even though magkaroong variation, mutation sa DNA, it's almost nonsense. Okay po? So, variation in proteins that have little effect on protein function or reproductive success. So, even though na merong variation sa proteins, kung yung protein na yun, wala naman siyang match function or function, wala naman siyang effect doon sa reproduction, sa success ng organism. So, it's almost negligible then. Okay? So, why natural selection cannot fashion perfect organisms? Number one, selection can only act on existing variation. Okay, so evolution is limited by historical constraints. Adaptations are often compromises. Chance, natural selection, and the environment interact. Okay, so yan. Okay, so that's gonna be the end of our discussion. I hope you learned something from me today. And before I end this discussion,